Hi, I'm Lisa Bedford and I'm the Survival Mom. In this video today I have something a little bit different, actually quite a bit different for you. And it is a part of an ancient and very well-known story that few of us have heard. And we have all heard, most all of us, have heard the story of Joseph from the book of Genesis in the Bible. Now, this isn't going to be a Bible study. It is just relaying this historical story to you. But there's a really there's a lesson and a warning to the other side of the story of Joseph, and that's what I wanted to pass on to you today. I'm not going to go into detail about the story. It starts, the story of Joseph, the part that I'm referring to starts in Genesis chapter 41. But just very, very briefly, Joseph was able to interpret a dream that the Pharaoh of Egypt had. And in this dream, it was a warning to Pharaoh and the country of Egypt that Egypt would experience 7 years of plenty. 7 years of just tremendous prosperity, as in particular where their livestock and where their food supply was concerned. But that was going to be followed by 7 years of famine. And 7 years of famine is a very, very long time. And just knowing a little bit about the geography of Egypt, I would think that famine was caused by a lack of rainfall, a drought, and then the fact that the Nile River would dry up, maybe completely, in different parts of Egypt. And the history of Egypt is so intertwined with the Nile River that I can see where if it dried up, there would be a huge famine. In fact, parts of Egypt used to be quite lush and green. But going back to the story, Joseph became the prime minister of Egypt. And his job was to oversee this tremendous task of storing food, and I'm sure that included preserving food. It wasn't all, they weren't just growing completely wheat. They were growing all kinds of food. And I imagine a lot of that had to be preserved. And then all of that was stored throughout the country of Egypt. And it was a huge undertaking. And apparently, though, that 7 years was such a time of wealth for the Egyptians that those who were producing the food were happy to turn it over to Joseph and the Pharaoh because they had plenty left over for themselves during those 7 terrific years. But the dream came true. After those 7 years, there was 7 years of famine. And 7 years of famine, if you can just multiply 52 times 7, that is an awful lot of weeks, hundreds of weeks, to pass without having food or looking at your own crops shriveling up. And even now in the United States, we have farmers who have been watching that happen over the last couple of years in particular. So as these crops dried up, hundreds and then thousands and thousands of Egyptian families came to Joseph or his subordinates or surrogates and said, we don't have any food. And initially, they were buying that food back, fair and square. We, as a country, we set this aside, and now we just can't hand it out for free, apparently. So you can pay us with money, and you will get food to take back to your homes. But after a while, 7 years is a long time, families began to run out of money. And to me, that is just a warning to me that no matter how much money I may have or how much food I may have stored, eventually it's going to run out. And sure enough, that's what happened to these Egyptian families. They came to Joseph and they said, we have no more money. We will literally starve to death if we don't have food. And Joseph said, I understand that completely. Turn over your livestock to us. It will become Pharaoh's livestock, and I will give you food in exchange. And I doubt that, families had to take every animal they owned at that time and turn it over. But after a period of months, maybe even after a period of a year, 2 years, they ran out of livestock. They had no more. They're out of money. They're out of livestock. They go to Joseph again and say, now what do we do? And he said, I understand your story completely. What we will do this time is, in exchange for the food that you need to keep your family from starving, I will take your lands, we will give those over to Pharaoh, and we will take you as slaves. In fact, to me, one of the biggest eye-openers comes in verse 25 in chapter 47 of Genesis. And the people said to Joseph, "You have saved our lives. May it please you, my Lord, to let us be Pharaoh's servants." By the time they had lost everything, their land, their livestock, their money, now they're signing over, in effect, their bodies. Not only are they doing that, but it says they were pleased, they were happy to become slaves of Pharaoh in exchange for food. Now, I have never lived through a famine like that, or lived through such a time where I would bargain away my own freedoms just for food to give to my family. When I was researching my book, I interviewed a couple of people who volunteered at Red Cross shelters, and I talked with the Red Cross, their main office, and I got details about what happens at a Red Cross shelter. And when you have nothing, you really are completely at the mercy of another person or an agency, a corporation, or a government. You are at their mercy. And you may say, "We have nothing," and I suppose perhaps you might get whatever you need in full with no strings attached, but more often than not, you are going to pay some kind of a price. And to me, that was the biggest warning in the story of Joseph. It's all a great idea to store food, all right? And that lesson, hits home. We all know that lesson from this particular story from thousands and thousands of years ago. But it's in the verses that follow that I think have a warning and maybe a little even more of a motivation for us to keep doing what we're doing in terms of preparedness. Whether you identify yourself as a prepper or not, surely you don't want to have a master over you who then calls the shots. And if you want to survive, if you want your children and your family to survive, you have to do what they say. So as Paul Harvey would say, now you know the rest of the story. And understandably so, when we talk about the story of Joseph, we stop just before we get to those verses in which the Egyptians become slaves. I want to thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you'll visit my website, www.thesurvivalmom.com. I am on Twitter, and during the course almost every day, whenever I find something interesting or fun or some gem of information, I just pop it in real quick on Twitter. It's a real super fast moving way of keeping in touch with people and learning. And I also am very active on Facebook. I really love to hear your comments, try to answer your questions, and just connect with you. So I'm Lisa Bedford, the Survival Mom, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time around.